Thank you all for being here today. We're going to engage this afternoon in a very important public discussion about the impacts of ongoing budget cuts to the court system. And we have a great lineup for testimony this afternoon at our hearing. As we all know, the civil justice system is the bedrock and the foundation of our freedoms. It serves as a beacon for disadvantaged communities, a pillar for our businesses, a shield for domestic violence survivors, and a safety net for children, veterans, and for seniors. But our democracy, a healthy democracy, cannot exist without a fully functioning, robust judiciary. And during the last 4 years, the California Judicial Branch budget has been reduced by nearly 30%. 30%. It's a huge bite out of their operating budget. The governor's budget proposal for this year would continue the $350 million general fund reduction to the judicial branch that was enacted in 2011-2012. And courts are continuing to feel the impact of years of reductions, and continuing reductions will be even more devastating without new revenues. And worse, without new revenues such as the governor's tax proposal, which the voters will be weighing in on in November, the governor's trigger cuts will slash another $125 million from our state's judiciary this year. Thus far, the judicial branch has been able to absorb budget cuts and offset them by funding shifts, using local reserves, and reductions in services, and even closures. But all of these have been one-time fixes that are no longer feasible. They are not sustainable to the nation's largest branch of justice. Today we'll hear, thank you. Today we'll hear many examples of how the recession caused the cuts, has forced many people into courts to remedy their own fiscal pain, misfortune, and abuse. And we'll hear how these cuts have created a huge deficit in the public's access to justice. We'll hear how justice delayed is justice denied. With that, I'd like to introduce the other speakers who we have here today who will provide a unique perspective on this ongoing challenge. First is the Chief Justice of the State of California, Tani Cantil-Sacawea.
Thank you, Senator Evans. What a pleasure it is to be here. You may be asking yourself why legislators, lawyers, judges, and justices have gathered here on the steps of the Capitol. And I'd like to tell you why. Since 2008, the judicial branch budget has seen an unprecedented cut in its ability to function, struggling mightily to provide justice for all. We're seeing closed signs in courtrooms up and down the state. In Sacramento, we know of a situation where a father sought custody of his son during a time when the mother was trying to take the son out of state. The father went to the Sacramento court, but due to delays, employee layoffs, reduced services, all due to budget cuts, that particular father was unable to file his papers, and his son left the state, fate unknown. We also know in San Diego, as a result of budget cuts, that a mediation hearing now takes many, many months in order for the judge to make a decision about custody, in order to gather the information, because it's taking so much time, because it needs employees' assistance and service to get that information for the judge. We also know that as a result of those many months of hearing, many families' lives are put on hold. Families are left to live in cars or shelters with their children, awaiting a decision by the court so they can get on with their life. So what we know now is that these two illustrations show that courts do not have any control of our budget or our time spent on cases or the types of cases that we hear and come before us. So I'd like to say a few words about the budget in that example, in this realm of no control over types or cases that come before us. As you know, the judicial branch budget is 2.4% of the overall state general fund. That's 2.4% to provide justice to 38 million Californians. And the judicial branch does much and many to try to make that work. But as Senator Evans just described to you, since 2008, we've had an almost 30% reduction to the judicial branch budget. That's $653 million since 2008, and in fiscal year 11-12, $350 million alone. And now more than ever, in a fourth year of a cut, in a fourth year of a recession, we need the judicial branch, we need the courts to be open. When homes are lost and jobs are taken and services are eliminated, people rightly come to the courts and have an expectation that there will be justice for all. These kinds of reductions and the critical need for courts to be open has resulted in an unprecedented outpouring of support for the judicial branch and the courts from the president of the state bar, John Streeter, and his organization, from the bench bar coalition headed by Justice O'Malley and Danny Murphy, also from the Open Courts Coalition headed by Neil McCarthy and Paul Kiesel, as well as One Justice and Judy McManigal and Toby Rothschild. I also want to express special thanks for Mr. Olson and Mr. Boyes for being here today on behalf of their efforts from the American Bar Association to shed light on the consequences of an underfunded judiciary, the consequences that have nationwide impact, statewide impact. I thank them very much for their support being here today. I also thank Mary McQueen, President of the National Center for State Courts, for her efforts in bringing this subject to the attention of so many Californians and really the United States as a whole. But our commitment, both the bench, the bar, isn't sufficient to continue to provide equal justice. We need to make tough decisions about how we fund the judicial branch for public access. We are in our fourth year of cuts. We have legislators who are making tough decisions, branch leaders who are making tough decisions to balance the revenue and the budgets of so many public entities. And so we in the judicial branch are mindful of our responsibility, the great promise of democracy, equal justice to all, to 38 million Californians. And we thank you for your support here today, and we look forward to the hearing later this afternoon. It's also my incredible pleasure to introduce to you a woman who served not only in the Assembly, but in the Senate for approximately 40 years, who really understands California's budget, California's struggle. Sorry, I gave away those 40 years. But proved to you a forceful, experienced, tough advocate. Proud to be here standing on this dais with her, Senator Lonnie Hancock.
I want to thank the Chief Justice and make clear that it has not been 40 years in the California State Legislature. No one can do that anymore. But I am in the California State Senate and chairing the subcommittee of the California budget that deals with corrections, the judiciary, and public safety. And I am looking forward very much to the testimony at our hearing this afternoon, because oftentimes we forget or overlook that the courts and our judiciary are not just another arm of government, another department or agency. They are, in fact, the third branch of our constitutional democracy. And as the Chief Justice has pointed out on many occasions, the legislature may pass laws, the governor may sign the laws, but without a judiciary to enforce the law, we don't have a functioning constitutional system that we need to give our people faith in democracy and hope and opportunity for themselves. Now, as we face heartbreaking budget cuts, due in large part to the fact that California, an anomaly in so many ways, also is one of only 8 states that require a 2/3 vote to close a tax loophole or raise any revenue whatsoever. But we face these budget cuts year after year after year, and they get more and more devastating. And honestly, the cuts that we may have to make this year, or that will be triggered if the tax initiative doesn't pass, are cuts that will profoundly cause hardship, if not tragedy, to the people of California. Some of them are immediate. Denial of a college scholarship and access to the opportunity that college provides. For some, it is even more profound, loss of access to health care, to food, to shelter that they require for their families. But we cannot forget, and we will not forget, that at the very root of this, one of the most profound cuts or restorations we will have to make is to the judiciary and our courts, that root of democracy that our our entire country stands on. So with me today to underscore the fact that California is not alone. As dire as our situation is, this is a national issue. I'm pleased to present Ted Olson, Theodore Olson, who is part of the great team of Boys and Olson, who, oh, and see, on cue. So I'm not. I'm instead going to introduce David Boies of the aforementioned bipartisan team that has headed up the American Bar Association's task force on the preservation of the justice system. That's the challenge, folks, no less. And welcome, David Boies.
Well, well, thank you very much. This is one of the most important issues confronting our country. As you've just heard, and as I think Ted and I have been trying to make clear around this country, the judicial system, our justice system, is the foundation of all the other rights. Health, safety, adequate education, adequate medical care, all of those fundamentally at bottom depend on the rule of law. And it is the judicial system that enforces the rule of law. And right now, courthouses are being closed, court is being suspended, judges do not have the resources that they need to try complicated cases. Justice is not only being delayed, but it is being denied. And without adequate funding, the justice system is going to continue to deteriorate. And one of the problems is that over a long period of time, the justice system budget has declined and declined until there isn't any fat, there isn't any muscle. We're now cutting the bone, we're now cutting the skeleton of our justice system. And it is a critical need, and those of us who are involved are conscious of how many other needs there are out there. But this need is really the foundation for all the other rights that are also so terribly important. And so we ask everybody to focus on this need. And it is, in a sense, every dollar matters. But the percentage of the state budget that goes to the justice system is very small, particularly when you consider that it is funding an entire branch of government. And in order for that governmental function to function, not for the lawyers and not for the court officers and not for the judges, but for the people, it needs adequate funding. And so whatever you can do, whatever this body can do to promote that is something that I think will bear great dividends for the people of California. This is a national problem. California is not the worst. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. There are states where people are even worse off in terms of the justice system. But it is critical that California, the leading state in the nation, more than 10% of the people in the country are here. This has been a leader in democracy. It's been a leader in the rule of law. It's been a leader in so many other ways. And so it's particularly important that here you have a functioning justice system. Ted?
I want to say that David started a federal trial in San Francisco this morning, and because this is so important, he got over here as fast as he could to participate in this press conference and to the hearing today. David and I are co-chairs of a task force created by the most recent president of the American Bar Association and the current president of the American Bar Association to study the problem of funding in state courts throughout the United States. We're leading a panel of distinguished lawyers from throughout the United States to investigate the nature of the problem throughout the United States. We're having hearings in various parts of the United States. The stories that we are hearing are tragic. We cannot have in this country a rule of law, liberty, a Bill of Rights, a functioning economy unless we have a functioning, accessible, efficient, working justice system. When people cannot get into a courtroom because it's dark or it's closed or the hours have been truncated, when courtrooms are closed, when court is delayed, when civil trials don't occur, when people have to go to court for a protective order from an abusive spouse and can't find any help, those are personal tragedies. And what's happening with the court system and court systems in this country are affecting the most vulnerable, the poorest, and the weakest among us most of all. The wealthy people can somehow find ways to achieve some form of justice, but if everybody can't get into court and can't adjust their grievances through the assistance of judges, then we have nothing. Everything that we have in this country, we don't have. The point has been made several times that the judiciary budget is a small fraction. Throughout the United States, it's 1 to 2. Here, it's 2.4% of the budget. And it's been cut 30% over the last 4 years, $600 and some million taken out of the budget of the judiciary. The judiciary is not overbloated. It doesn't have a big bureaucracy. There wasn't fat in the judicial budget to begin with. So every dollar that's taken out of the budget of the judiciary is taking away the rights of our citizens to go to court. And the thing is, the people that need the courts don't have a lobby here in Sacramento or in Albany or in the other states where the budgets are being made and appropriations take place, because the labor is represented here, business is represented here, technology and transportation and energy and agriculture are represented here, but the people who need the court system don't know it when they haven't yet had to go to court, when someone in their family hasn't been arrested or someone in their family needs a domestic assistance in some fashion. You don't know it, and then when you do need the judicial system, it's not there because the money has been taken away from it. So I guess our point is, and we're finding this throughout the country, is that these resources have got to be restored to the courts for every single one of us, and we're here to talk about that some more today. I'm very grateful for you to have this, Senator, for having this hearing.
Next we have Mr. John Streeter.
Thank you. What an honor it is to be among the speakers with our amazing Chief Justice, who has provided such leadership on this issue and been a focal point for us to rally around. And just as a small comment on how much in agreement we are in the legal community around the state. Ted mentioned that David has come up from a trial this morning in San Francisco. Well, that trial is against my partner. And even though we are literally on the other side of the courtroom, and that is true of many other lawyers who are in the audience today, plaintiffs' lawyers, labor lawyers, corporate lawyers, all of us, government lawyers, we all agree on this one fundamental point. I attended and heard testimony at a series of hearings. We are doing a version of what Mr. Olson and Mr. Boyes talked about at the ABA here in California, thanks to One Justice, which is the umbrella organization for the legal services providers in the state of California. One Justice, and I want to acknowledge and give thanks to Julia Wilson, the executive director of One Justice, and her staff for organizing this series of hearings. What it did for us, just as the ABA is doing nationally, was it allowed us to make a record of the impact, of the injury to our citizens of these draconian budget cuts. Now, lawyers are mobilizing all over the state in defense of the courts. We had a large rally in Los Angeles, right in front of the Los Angeles courthouse. That was sponsored under the auspices of the Open Courts Coalition. The two co-chairs of that organization, Paul Kiesel and Neil McCarthy, are here today. Wow, it was really something to see hundreds of lawyers in the streets, literally in the streets, across from the courthouse in Los Angeles. 2 days from now in San Francisco, we will be doing the same thing. The lawyers are coming out. The lawyers understand this issue. Mr. Olson said correctly that those who are most hurt by these cuts don't have a voice in this building. They do have representatives, though, the lawyers. We are the people who understand how this system works. We are the ones who understand the true day-to-day consequences of delay in the court system. And fundamentally, we are the ones who must give the reminder that at stake here is our constitutional structure of government. We are supposed to have 3 co-equal branches, co-equal. The judiciary is an independent branch. Too often it is forgotten that independence means significant budgetary integrity. We lawyers stand as protectors of our clients. We understand the heavy responsibility of putting the interests of others before our own. It is a matter of duty to do so because we have taken an oath as officers of the court, an oath to uphold the justice system. The crisis of funding in our courts threatens our justice system to a degree that none of us have ever seen before in our professional lives, to such an extent that the rule of law itself is in peril. That is why lawyers are mobilizing all across the state on this issue, indeed all across the country, as we can see from the presence of these probably the 2 most prominent and distinguished lawyers in the United States today. Every lawyer has an interest in this issue, from solo practitioners to big firm partners and associates, from criminal prosecutors and criminal defenders to legal aid lawyers, and even counselors to the very wealthy who depend on the certainty, the stability, and the confidence that only the courts can provide. So, on behalf of the 230,000 members of the State Bar of California, I have one simple message. No courts, no justice, no freedom. Thank you.
Thank you very much to everybody that spoke. I'm going to wrap this up just by summarizing. I think it's clear everybody agrees. As the pillars of our judicial system begin to crumble, so too do the foundations of our constitutional democracy. And I hearken back to the Pledge of Allegiance, which we say every day in the Senate: liberty and justice for all. There is no justice and there is no liberty without a strong, functional judicial system. And as you've heard, nationwide, we're in danger of losing that. And so I'm delighted with the witnesses that we have that are going to be testifying this afternoon. I think it's going to shed some very strong, shining light on the challenges that we're facing as a legislature and as a judiciary. Unfortunately, I don't think we have time for questions, but I would invite any reporters that have questions to contact my office or Senator Hancock's office or to come to our hearing this afternoon. Thank you very much for everybody.